Well, welcome everybody, and it's really lovely to have so many people wanting to come and hear me talk. I haven't actually written a talk, as I was saying earlier. I'm kind of freewheeling it a bit because it's such a huge area, but I have put these slides together, and I hope you'll use the chat box. And I wanted to try and make it as interactive as possible. And we'll have hopefully plenty of time for questions and conversation at the end anyway, but we'll go through the slides. So I wanted to start with a quote from Richard Maybe's book called Weeds, which I just picked up again and started reading the other day. And I just thought it was rather amazing because he says, the poppy is a motif throughout this book. The characteristics that make it a survivor are common to all successful weeds. As a type, they are mobile, prolific, genetically diverse. They are unfussy where they live, adapt quickly to environmental stress, use multiple strategies for getting their own way. It's curious that it took so long for us to realize that the species they most resemble is us. I thought that was great. We're just like weeds. So let's go on to the next slide. I don't want to dwell on this because I want it to be a sort of positive thing, but it's worth, I think, reminding ourselves, as a member of the More Meadows group here on Dartmoor, how many meadows we have lost. Of course, the good thing is that on Dartmoor, we're nearly up to 1,000 acres of meadows with our membership, and I'm sure there's many more than that. But we've lost so much of all these unique habitats. If you want to find out more about that, there is that link there, the Wildlife Trust's news, how that is going. And of course, we've also in Devon, we've got a red list of species and that kind of thing. But as I say, I didn't want to dwell on that so much. I wanted to sort of get back to the main thing. So let's go on to the next slide. I think I actually found another slide for this, which is going to be on the PDF that's sent out. But this is, it's so true how we, when we were, well, certainly, when I was younger, when I first came to Dartmoor, age 5, I do remember clouds of blue butterflies in the meadows and lots of butterflies. And, now we just see one or two. And that's that shifting baseline syndrome that we see, which we urgently need to, do stuff about. Luckily, we can all make a difference, so that's good. So let's go on to the next slide. I've also been reading such a lot recently, but I've been reading the Homo Deus book particularly, and I think that sums it up very well. Oh, in fact, that's my next quote. I've written it down. The only two things I've written down, actually. The Judeo-Christian religions have had a big part to play in placing man, in inverted commas, above all life forms, distancing us from the natural world. In contrast, the old religions and beliefs put mankind as a part of the system, and every life form, even every rock and part of the landscape, is imbued with spirit. And I think you see that, with all kind of tribal religions and beliefs that are still going today. So it's this sort of feeling that we are somehow superior to all other life forms, which has been very destructive for our land and landscape. Okay, next slide. Can't remember what they are now. Oh yeah, so this one, that's my daughter in the middle, Kezzy, who was at UCL, University College London, and came back to Tragford to help run the BioBlitz that we had in the churchyard with her professors and various other students from the conservation group at UCL, and people like Nick Baker setting up cameras inside and microscopes inside the church. And we've done that the last 2 years. And of course, because of this horrible virus, we had to cancel it this year. But the idea is to involve as many children and have a whole day with scientists out there recording everything that's going on in the churchyard. And we've been working for many years to try and change the horrible just strimming the churchyard and leaving all the cuttings there regime, which has caused quite a bit of upset in Tragford, hasn't it? With the Tragford people will know. But there are organisations nationally like Caring for God's Acre who have written a very good manual on this. And through More Meadows, we've been working with churchyards in Ashburton, Buckfast-Lee. There's already a good project in Throwley. And there are churchyards all over the country. The Caring for God's Acre is actually based in Shropshire. So they're very strong, Shropshire, Herefordshire particularly. And we have the Living Churchyards project down in Devon as well. So there's quite a lot of initiatives. So that's one thing that we can do, is working with churchyards and with schools. And I think the next slide shows, oh yeah, so people are probably familiar with this, the lost words, when the Oxford Junior Dictionary only has a set number of, well, it says over 10,000 words and phrases there in that, on that thing, but it doesn't keep expanding. And every year they've taken words out of the dictionary. So BlackBerry the fruit was replaced with BlackBerry the mobile phone device and that kind of thing. And when Jackie Morris, who illustrated the Lost Words book, heard about this, she was, she would, like all of us, I'm sure, quite distressed at that. And she thought, I know, I'll write to Robert Macfarlane and see if he'll do something with me, envisaging a kind of small little enterprise. And Robert Macfarlane, who I'm sure most if not all of you know, responded very positively so Jackie did the paintings and Robert did the words. And this amazing book, and you don't get the sense of it there. It's a really big book. It's in size, and copies have gone to loads and loads of schools. Lots of people have clubbed together and bought copies of the book. Here in Devon, I think a book has gone to every school in the county. They've got a whole kind of education pack on the back of it. Lots of work going on in schools with it. And I've just been at a children's birthday party in the park actually, and someone told me there's a lost words music now which you can search for, and he says that's really amazing. So that's something to look out for if you don't know. And the next slide, I think, if I remember, oh yeah, I dug out my old nature study books from my primary school, and I thought that was my best subject at school, nature study. And you can see I've been obviously picked the page with the gold star, but I absolutely loved it. And being I was brought up in suburban London, and for me it was such a lifeline, and I used to come down to Devon every holiday. But I was a bit obsessed with sort of nature study, and luckily the school was too. And we did such a lot of, you can see how good my writing was, Ingerland. We did such a lot of, practicing of handwriting and writing skills and everything. And it is coming back in lots of schools now, nature topics, but it kind of got very sidelined in the past. So I'm hoping that will come back. And with one of my organisations I work with, the Growing Devon Schools Partnership, we're very much about getting children outside. Our primary thing is getting them outside, and we do it mostly around gardening, around growing, cooking and eating, and more, and right from the start I wanted it to be more wildlife based, but it's such a big topic that it gets built into it as well. And children of course respond fantastically well to all this stuff. I mean, the level of interest at the BioBlitz, and any time I've been into schools talking compost, which I do a lot, and looking at bugs, they just absolutely love it, all of them. Okay, next slide.
Well, sorry, Nicky.
That's all right, if you can find it. I can't remember what it is because I haven't got my
Alice, it's not going to the next slide.
things up ahead. Not going to the next slide.
Hang on. Bear with me.
So we did, you can see, I was just reading what I was written there on, oh, there they are. nowls. But you can take any subject. The great thing is with doing this kind of topic work is you can take any subject and go through and really deal with the whole curriculum, actually, which is quite amazing. Yeah, that'd probably be it. Oh, is it not doing that? Maybe the file size is too big.
Sorry, everybody.
All right.
Bound to be a technical hitch somewhere.
Yeah. I can get I'm just wondering if I can see my slides at the same time. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, the next slide is so yeah, the next slide, which I've got up on my one now, is
Yes, got it.
You got it?
Yeah. Can you see it? Can everyone see it? Yeah.
I can see it. So I think that's a really crucial point, that we often, you know, we cannot value our natural world unless we experience it and often name it. And I found that was quite an eye-opener for me. I suppose, you know, when you're so passionate about something and you've done it for so many years. We were doing it's taken quite a long while to involve the Tragford conservation project, because if you want to manage a churchyard, and you know, we had to sort of gently transition away from this strimming and blitzing it, well, not blitzing it, strimming it, and leaving the strimmings there. And one of the key things you need to do is to rake up the strimmings. So for the last 3 years, I've been part of a very small team trying to rake up all the clippings in the churchyard. It's a massive job. It's a big churchyard in Tragford. And we managed to get, or I managed to persuade the conservation volunteers to finally to come and help us. So we had a mass rake up in May, I think it was, when they did a major strim. And that really helps then to get more biodiversity in if you can rake it up. And what really surprised me was a lot of the conservation people were coming up to me and saying they didn't really understand what they were doing and why they were doing it. They'd just been asked to do it or told to do it as part of their program. And they were asking the names of lots of the plants, because even though it had been trimmed, there were areas where it had been left. And they were asking me what was going on and what I was doing. And I was explaining how we were using yellow rattle in particular to parasitize the grasses. And, you know, so people won't, unless they know the names of the plants, they won't get so engaged with it. And I found that quite an eye-opener. Yeah, let's go on to the next one, if it will.
Hang on, it's every time I admit someone late. Bear with me. It's because it's when I admit people, it stops screen share.
Oh, okay. So people still joining in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So bear with me a second.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, welcome to new people.
Yeah, there we go, Nicky.
Oh, great. Yeah, this is one of my bugbears, really. Seeing people, well, mowing lawns and strimming verges and all the rest of it, you know, and this sort of concept of neat and tidy, which is really quite it's quite a new thing. It's sort of got worse, but also luckily there's people who are reacting to it. So I do this quite often when I'm driving around Devon Lane. So this is the back lane to Exeter from Tragford. That's sort of beyond Whitstone somewhere, I think, where that bit on the left with that mowed bit that people just seem to love doing. And then a little bit further down the road, there's that beautiful verge there with all those early purple orchids. Those are early purple orchids in there, a whole load of them. And there were primroses, loads of primroses down there. And then you can see that little bit of, I haven't got all the photos, I've taken loads of photos of it, but just beyond that bit of fencing there, the whole of the other side of it was just strimmed right back, and a huge great swathe just pointlessly cut, and the strimming's not picked up anyway, so it'll just revert. It'll kill off all the interesting, lovely flowers and just revert to, you know, docks and coarser grasses and that kind of things that can take it. I think the next slide says a bit more on the same topic. Oh yeah. You can read that yourself. They make no sense. I heard Bob Flowerdew on Gardener's Question Time recently saying he had this area of the garden that took an enormous amount of his time every week or so in the summer, and then he just stopped dealing with it, and that was his lawn. So people, especially in this country, well, all over actually, I've travelled a bit, and people seem to be a bit obsessed with lawns, but why are they so obsessed? And I did a little bit of research on this, and I think the next slide shows that. So they were this status symbol. So if you had a useless bit of ground that you could just grow grass on, you know, you had to be really rich, you know. And I guess we have this thing like an Englishman's house is his castle, and they have their bit of lawn. So they're out there strimming and mowing, and then, you know, even worse, kind of blowing leaves with these horrible leaf blowers and making all sorts of noise everywhere. So it's just a bit of status symbol, you know. I mean, obviously a bit of lawn can be useful to sit out and have your tea on and things, but so many people just needlessly mow huge areas of lawn. Okay, next one. Oh, that's just more of the same. You can see it's my real kind of bête noire. But I mean, I cannot understand why people. We've had a lot of comments in Tragford actually about the one on the right, the one on the left. People saying things like, "Isn't it disgusting? Isn't it disgraceful?" And then it gets trimmed, so it's like that with all the trimmings left there, which sort of kill off bits of grass. It's a horrible mulch, and it really beats me as to why people think that the right hand side is kind of neat and tidy. And I think it's this sort of, I think it's a really deep-seated thing, like this control of nature. And then when you walk, if you can't really see in that picture, you can see some bright splashes of color at the back of the right hand picture, and a lot of the flowers that are put out in the churchyard are either plastic, or they're made of fabric, or sometimes people will buy really nice flower, you know, from the florists, and put them in a jar, or in those little you know, pots that they provide on some of the graves. But of course they last a few days, and that's it. And in fact, I've been down and I've actually picked perfectly good fresh flowers off the compost heap at the bottom of that churchyard, take them home for my wife. Lovely. But I mean, I'd much rather have the wildflowers. So my mother, who's down there, she's got a lovely patch, which is, I put a little rope or strings and posts around, and it's a wildflower area. So let's go on to the next one. So yeah, as I said, I think it is this deep-seated thing, and I used to buy Farmers Weekly years ago, back in the sort of 70s and 80s. I used to sometimes buy the Farmers Weekly because I was fascinated by the adverts in it. And I've actually been trying to find some old copies from those periods, because it was this warfare, us, you know, waging war on nature. And you can see it in some of the old, these are just some I managed to find on the internet, but going back, so all these chemical companies, DDT is good for me, you know. And this is after Rachel Carson's Silent Spring was published. But some of the imagery that I saw I remember was sort of tanks and bazookas and, you know, armies going out to wage this war on nature. And it became quite well known that the more that you do spray, the more that you actually get more and more pests and weeds that weren't, well, they weren't weeds before, invasive plants that could withstand the regime, that became problems where there hadn't been problems before. So yeah, I think the next slide again says something more on that. Oh yeah, well, of course, Silent Spring came out. So she warned of the effects of DDT and pesticides back in the 60s. And actually things got a lot worse after that. More and more organophosphates and organochlorine pesticides came along, particularly, and then herbicides. And particularly now, of course, the development of glyphosate, which is still all around. And before that, 2,4,5-T and D. which are hormonal herbicide sprays, which you can still buy in Bowden's, in our local hardware shop in Tragford. It's still freely available. I went in only yesterday and saw they've got SBK brushwood killer in there, which can, and it, I didn't say on the label, I had a good look at the label knowing I was going to be talking today, and I couldn't see it said 2,4,5-T on the label. In fact, it didn't have any information really on the label, but it was a chemical that was banned by all the unions, like the railway unions, had to spray it all the way along the railway tracks to control bramble and stuff like that. And they refused to use it because of so many anecdotal stories about people being ill from using these herbicide sprays. And still the manufacturers of glyphosate are still arguing that it's perfectly safe, and it kind of gets somehow magically rendered safe as soon as it hits the ground. And they don't tell the whole truth, because they don't actually have to declare all the active substances. They're only talking about the active chemical. They're not talking about the surfactants, which are the sort of soapy bits which that it sticks to and sticks to the plant. And it's these surfactants, these detergents and soaps, which kill soil life anyway. So if you're not killed by the chemical, you're killed by the soap, basically. And it's well known that soap is a kind of quite effective, fairly gentle insecticide, soft soap for things like aphid attacks. Not that I use it. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to get down to, yeah, what is a weed? And what if we just banned the word weed and instead talked about wildflowers? So that, I took that picture. I'm really pleased with that picture. I really like it. I was in Norway waiting for a bus, and that was the sort of plasticky back of the bus stop with these plants growing up against it. And I just thought it was really beautiful. My wife usually thought, well, I was mad taking a picture of the back of the bus stop for quite a long while, until she realized what it was like. But yeah, what if we banned the word weed and instead talked about wildflowers? Okay, let's go on to the next one. So I'm not expecting you to take that all in now, but I love doing mind maps. One of my things, doing mind maps. And I've called it weeds there, but you know, I'm talking about these plants which are often called weeds. And of course they're wildflowers, they're useful plants. They've got incredible, you know, wildlife connections, like with, you know, one of my favorites is ragwort, which is a real bête noire, obviously, because of the cinnabar moth, and the nettles, obviously, for butterflies. And, you know, all these things that can be done with so-called weeds. I put at the bottom there, I'm pointing at my own screen, you can't see me, but Korsmo's prints in the green under art. And I don't know if you can see the picture behind me, but the picture behind me here is one of Korsmo's prints, which I got in Norway. And you can actually find that. I think I put a link right at the end where you can see the whole of the charts. So Korsmo painted all these weed charts back in the 1920s and 30s to inform farmers about particular wildflowers that would come up in their fields, and be aware of what they were. Again, it's that thing of naming them and being aware of them, and then how you can control them, because obviously some plants will compete against your crop plant. So it's quite important to know that. So you'll have these slides on your thing. Oh, another thing I wanted to pick up was, and I've got some pictures, I think, but when you go to other countries, so I was in Greece a couple of years ago with my daughter. We're actually doing a permaculture course, and I found out about horta. It says they're Greek horta, under edible plants, and it's really common to go to the market. So in Athens, in the market, there was a woman selling these bundles of plants, all wild forage plants, right in the heart of Athens. And I learned a tiny bit of Greek. She got very upset with me when I didn't carry on talking Greek, but I ran out of Greek. But I was trying to find out what she was actually selling. what were these plants and what do you do with them? And basically what they do is they just collect these wild plants, and they'll steam them or boil them, and then dress them as a salad, generally put oil and lemon juice on, and they're absolutely delicious. And you get them in loads of restaurants so if you're ever in Greece, you know, ask for horta with your meal. Amaranth is very common there. I learnt that there, and that's a really, really lovely one. Okay, let's go on to the next one.
Oh, hang on, Nicky. We've just got to do a new share again.
Okay, are people still coming in?
Yes.
Blimey, I'm gonna have to start again.
But you'll all get the slides. I'll send them to you, so it's fine. And it's recorded as well, so
yeah,
you'll get the link.
Can I see it now?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. So I don't know if people have heard of this amazing woman, Sophie Leguil. I think she's French, but in London, she started this thing called More Than Weeds. So I don't know if you can read that, but it says morethanweeds.co.uk. Lovely little site. So she's been going around Lambeth, I think it was mostly where she lives, but it says Hackney there. But she's writing the names of the weeds on the pavement. And it's really caught on. Lots of people have been doing this. This was from an article in The Guardian. And I really love that idea of, you know, informing people of what's going on. So she's been doing this during the lockdown all over the place and encouraging people to join in. She found out it was actually illegal to do this. So she contacted the council and they gave her sort of special permission to do it. So she started quite a movement doing this. And I think there's a couple more pictures if you go on. There you go. Herb Robert there is one of my all-time favorite plants. It grows all over the place, grows in the shade, grows in the sun. It's got beautiful foliage. It's got beautiful flowers. Some people say it smells like cat pee, but you know, it's maybe a bit of an acquired taste there. Viper's Bugloss, the one below it, it's not looking its best there, growing out the pavement, but I grow that on my allotment, and it has it's the most amazing bee plant, most beautiful blue flowers, and it grows big. Fantastic plant. Okay, let's look at the next one. That's what I was talking about in Oslo. So, because Yuli, my wife's Norwegian, and we were there a couple of years ago, actually to do something to do with her father with the resistance in the war, but at the Resistance Museum. But we really struck by that poster. So that says weeds, you know, are they friends or foes, basically? And we went into the National Botanic Garden in Oslo, and the first thing was this massive, great planter, completely full of nettles, right by the gate going in. Two of them actually, either side, flanking the gate, and these posters up on the most amazing exhibition all over the Botanic Gardens with so much stuff. And yeah, if you look on that link, which you'll get, but if you look up Korsmo, you'll see a lot more, and it's in English, not all in Norwegian. But I was really fascinated by that, and I really want to do this. So I've been talking to Toby Buckland, Toby's Garden Festival that has at Powderham Castle most years. Of course, that was cancelled this year because I was going to do a kind of pilot of this Festival of Weeds within the Toby Buckland. It's taken me about 5 years to convince him to do it, along with other people, to have this kind of more of a kind of wild approach and to just the straightforward garden stalls. So hopefully we will be doing that in the future. So let's look at the next one. There you are. Oh, it's just some pictures. So those are pictures I took actually in the at the exhibition, just on my phone actually. So they're not very good pictures, but they give you an idea about how beautiful the posters are at any rate. And things like the one on the right there, the Silene vulgaris, the bladder campion, that is a very common edible horta plant in Greece and in other Mediterranean countries. and it is quite a weed, if you like, as well. To talk a bit more about what I mean about that, but it's quite, you know, it's a tough plant, but it's really lovely, very beautiful too. A bit of ragwort look on there. Oh, there's one. So that's one I took just opposite your dad's house, Kate, in the pavement.
Yeah.
The pineapple, the pineapple weed growing out, and some woman came by as I was sort of on hands and knees photographing that, looking very puzzled. But that's pineapple weed, and and you smell it. So you crush it and smell it. It smells very strongly of pineapple, and it's such a tough plant. You often find it growing around gateways when you're going into fields. It's one of those plants that you can tread on, and but it gives a lovely scent. But the thing I love about these plants is they're so you know, they're so kind of cheeky and strong, and they're getting in there. And you know, nothing I like more is like being in somewhere like central London or in a big city and seeing a plant growing on a kind of crossing, you know. They will take over. Alan Weisman wrote this fantastic book called The World Without Us, and actually we got him to Tragford probably about 10 years ago now, and he talked in the church from the pulpit about his book The World Without Us, and about how nature will reclaim, you know, that the planet doesn't need us. You know, when we're gone, it'll get on just fine. And he's got all these wonderful stories and pictures about abandoned towns and things that are just being reclaimed by plants, and nature and wildlife moves in very quickly. So, oh yes, lost on the bottom of my screen actually. It says weed or rebel plant.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I just realised it said that, because I read that in another one of my books, which is coming up, or the books, not my books, the books that I've been reading that's come up. I'll go on to that. So yeah, go on to the next one, Kate, because those were pictures taken in London quite recently, actually, within the last year. And I just love walking around when I've been walking around bits of London and seeing what's growing in people's front gardens and what comes up. It's quite incredible, you know, out of these cracks in the pavement. And I think there's a couple more coming up. I'm a bit obsessed with that. That's that one, anyone Tragford people will recognise. The one on the left grows down the drang everywhere. That's called Pellitory of the Wall. I love that one. And that purple toadflax on the right, you know, some it's a beautiful plant, sort of wild snapdragon. Some garden designers are really starting to use some of these plants in their planting display. So I think the next slide has, oh no, a few more. So that's one of my favorite that those of you that saw me, you can see that I've got some convolvulus right next to me. I've got the white convolvulus and the blue convolvulus, which is the morning glory. And of course, poppies. So that picture on the right, actually, that is in Hackney, in a park, because my daughter was living, that's London Fields, and they have made this huge, great wildflower area. Those are annual. That's a sort of annual wildflower, which is probably what most people think about when they think about a wildflower meadow. Actually, us in more meadows, we're talking about perennial flowers, which are very different. But these are arable sort of cornfield plants. And when I, back in the 70s, when I was at art college in Oxfordshire, the fields used to be like that. And within a very few years, the poppies had all been sprayed off, poppies and cornflowers. They'd all been sprayed out of those fields. And you just didn't see, you'd see the odd ones around the edge. But, you know, as I said at the beginning, the poppy is, you know, it's a real survivor. Okay, next one. Oh, I mean, this is probably one of the most reviled weeds, isn't it? From most gardeners would agree. They go on about bindweed, but in the right place, you know, it's beautiful. This is in Tragford again. This is just down. Those of you that know Tragford, it's just down Mill Street, and growing up a big granite wall like that, it's beautiful. Okay, so those are the books I was talking about. So what have we designed with weeds? So that book I found, The Wild About Weeds, Jack Wellington book, The Rebel Plants, it's really lovely book with lots of really great ideas about, you know, he's a proper garden designer, and he really uses weeds very well. And then I was told about Rebecca Hoskins, who some of you might know. She's got the most fantastic blog on her website, and she was talking about Aaron Pfeiffer, who was a disciple of Steiner, and he became a big agricultural sort of expert in America. He moved out from Austria to America, and he did a lot of work. I knew him from his work with composting. He did all sorts of incredible things, actually. But his little book on weeds and what they tell us is really fascinating about how they inform what is going on in the soil, the stories that they tell. So you can tell, you know, once you get your eye in, you only have to look at the plants to know what the pH is like, really, or have a really good guess at the soil type. You know, you can just see what it's like. As I mentioned earlier, that pineapple weed, you know that's going to survive in an area where it's very well trodden, like the plantains family. And my other poster I've got, which I can't put all my posters up, but I got a big poster of plantains, which is probably, well, again, it's one of my favorite plants. I've got lots of favorite plants. Anyway, let's go on to the next one. That's the Richard Mabey book I was talking about on weeds, How Vagabond Plants Gatecrash Civilization. It's a really interesting book, so fascinating. And the bit that I really loved, and I've forgotten the name now. I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I've got the book here. I think hopefully I put a marker in at the right place. What I really loved was, yeah, that's right. Rose Macaulay. In the second one, so during the Blitz, Rose Macaulay has written a book about it. It's called The World My Wilderness. And she went around with Penelope Fitzgerald, that's right. Penelope Fitzgerald was then in her late 20s and half Macaulay's age. And they used to go on plant hunting expeditions around all these bombed out areas right in central London, and produce this incredible list of rare plants and plants which had been unearthed from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So going right back to kind of even back to sort of Roman times, because seeds have got this amazing capacity to survive and just go dormant. And then as with the poppy fields, of course, in Flanders, you know, to suddenly bloom amongst all that devastation. So that bit, I've actually just ordered that book, The World Is My Wilderness. I found it online. There's a secondhand book search thing that my sister sent me, and so being a bookaholic, I've had a look there. And the other book there, the Dave Goulson one, is also fantastic. Sorry, Kate. Yeah, but that one, Gardening to Save Plants, that's quite a new book. In fact, it's in the Tragford bookshop, the new Tragford bookshop. Dave Goulson set up the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, and he came to one of our More Meadows conferences. He's a fantastic speaker and very passionate about stopping using neonicotinoids on plants, because still a lot of plants that you get at the plant centre have got neonicotinoids in, and they will poison the bees, and pollinating insects of all sorts, and they're so dangerous. And that book, if anyone wants to sort of create you know, more wildlife friendly areas in their garden, it's such a good book. It's really amazing. Okay, this is like a book club, isn't it, really? And someone told me about this one, Around the World in Native Plants. This is fascinating too. This guy, Stephen Barstow, he lives right up next to the Arctic Circle in Norway, and he has he's in the Guinness Book of Records for the salad with the most amount of plants. So that picture on that beautiful colourful picture on the cover, that's his salad bowl of edible flowers and plants. And I love the fact that I think it was, oh, I forget, it's something like 500, I've got the book here somewhere, something like 500 different species in that salad bowl. Big salad bowl. And then on the right, there's just one page from it, which is, of course, dandelion. And you're good at Latin, but that is the common dandelion. And there are pages and pages just on dandelions and the uses of dandelion. And that's, again, it's a real favorite plant because, and I think the next slide, Kate, has got, oh no, it's not there, another one. That's another book, but that's another great forager. So this is not about foraging, this talk at all, but so many of these plants are edible. And I was really surprised to learn about hogweed, because which is the page it's on there, because hogweed apparently is the most, and I haven't eaten it yet, but when it's shooting in the spring, one of the most delicious plants, you know. So why are we kind of strimming it down and whacking it back all the time when we could be eating it and, you know, just celebrating it? And it's also a very good pollinator. And in fact, I was on a Meadows forum just the other day where these 4 different people were talking about creating and maintaining meadows. And one of the questions that came up was, how can I get rid of the hogweed? And I thought, this terrible weed in my meadow. And oh yeah, I've seen that. And all of the presenters said, it's a really useful plant. You know, it's a great pollinator. It's a forage plant. The cattle love it. It's just not so good in hay. So I just seen Abby said something about lamb's lettuce. Yeah, lamb's lettuce comes up all over my allotment in the spring. It's a very common plant to come up on the allotment, isn't it? And so, I mean, you can buy cultivated forms of it in France. You can buy it in seed packets. They call it mâché. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Mash or mâché, M-A-C-H-E. And it's because you can probably get a bigger leaf variety, but it's a very good salad plant. Yeah. So we pick it for salad. Yeah. Does that answer that question on the lamb's lettuce? Let's go on to the next slide. We've got it.
Hang on.
I thought
it's just it's another person joining, that's all.
Oh, it's still joining?
Yeah.
Thank goodness me.
I'm just trying to, hang on.
Oh, nearly an hour in.
Hang on.
We're nearly at the end of the slides. There's only three left, I think, 3 or 4 left.
Hang on, Alison, I can't get on to green share one this time. Oh, I need to go upstairs.
You can see that the dandelion. I thought I'd put that in after the other dandelion one.
Mm-hmm. And then go to screen.
In Greece and in Italy, so there's a packet of dandelion seeds that I bought in Greece. You know, they really love them. And in Italy, I was on a big organic farm a couple of years ago, not all that long ago, doing more composting work stuff. And they were growing, you know, dandelions in very neat rows, big leaf varieties. There's a lot of variation in the dandelion. So they do select them out for better strains. They also had a massive, great plant by their reception. It was all just thick nettles. So they were really celebrating nettles there. And of course, I find the dandelion is, because they come up one of the first ones in the spring, they're so important. And I've got them on my allotment. And what I do is I actually grow them on the paths, or I allow them to just stay on the paths, because they're not doing any harm there. You get lovely, the paths sort of edged with this beautiful yellow flowers. You can eat the leaves. You can dig up the roots and make coffee. I did try that. It's a bit of a process. It was really nice, actually, but it was quite a lot of work. But yeah, I love them. Let's go on to the next one. just a couple more books on a bit of a sort of what my next door neighbour is Nick Baker, so that's one of his more recent books, The Rewild, which is really nice. And then that one I got in Uptown, Kate, The Wild Remedy.
Yeah, remember.
And it's a lovely book. A woman that had, you know, quite severe depression, and just talking about how, you know, how beneficial it is just being outside and being in the wild. And that's one of the things that, you know, along with Lucy, I know who's here, is something with social prescribing through the health centre, and having connections to the wild is such a valuable thing, just getting outside for a whole range of mental and physical well-being. And I think there's there's just a couple more there. So if you're interested in this stuff, that was another book, that No Nettles Required book on the right there, Ken Thompson, I picked up. That's a really interesting, because he did a load of wildlife surveys. So this is the book that kind of shows what you can do, as well, we can all do as individuals, by allowing a bit more wildlife in our gardens and gardening for wildlife. And it's so important for that. So he was at the University at Sheffield, and they did a lot of research with their students. They went back to these, I forget how many gardens, 40 gardens or something, over a period of time, and they looked at the biodiversity. So they were doing kind of mini bioblitzes in people's gardens, but over a period of time. And the amount of wildlife and insect life, you know, that there was in the gardens was phenomenal. And what he was saying, the reason he's called it No Nettles Required, is because they didn't find in any of the gardens in Sheffield any of the caterpillars of all the butterflies that eat the caterpillars of the butterflies that eat the nettles. So the comma, the red admiral, the peacock, and the small tortoiseshell all eat nettles. They didn't find any of them in any of the gardens over that year. And that's because nettles, you need to have a big patch of nettles, and it needs to be in full sunlight. So in our meadow that we've got here, which I can see out my window, we have got a really big patch of nettles in full sun, and it's always got loads of peacock, particularly peacock and small tortoiseshell butterfly caterpillars on it. So he's saying you don't really need the nettles, and if you just keep a few nettles for the butterflies in the shady corner, then it's almost a waste of time. And in the book, he's referencing Jennifer Owen, The Wildlife of a Garden, and she a lot. And so I thought I must get that book as well, being a bookaholic. So I found that one secondhand, and she's done I think it might even be 50 years now that she's been studying. She's a proper scientist, studying the wildlife in her garden over that period of time. And the great thing is that they don't all have to be, well, I say it's a great thing, they don't all have to be, you know, wild plants. They don't have to all be wild native plants, because there's lots and lots of plants which are perfectly good at, I mean, for instance, the fuchsia is a food plant of the elephant hawk moth. You know, the buddleia, everyone knows, is a fantastic plant for butterflies. So you don't have to just grow native plants. Okay, so I think that's my last thing, really. So it's a sort of series of questions, you know, like, what if weeds were celebrated as wildflowers? And what if every lawn was mostly given over to a wildflower meadow? And what if every garden was full of pollinator plants? And we put more bee and bug hotels up in the right place and in the right way, you know, south facing, and more nest boxes and ponds, of course, been fantastic. And there a lot of this is also really good for carbon sequestration as well. And I think, is that the last slide?
I think so, because someone else has just joined, so I'm going to just the new chair anyway. Hang on a sec.
I just missed it, whoever's just joined. Okay.
Yeah, that is the last one, Nicky. So
yeah. So we could go back to having a look at each other, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, so some people have put some things in the chat box as well. So, so Lucy says, thanks, Nicky. I'm developing a green prescription with the Woodland Trust. Is anyone interested in to learn more?
Yeah, isn't that great? I think, I mean, I definitely, do you want to say something about that, Lucy?
I definitely didn't want to say too much because I know this is your time, Nicky, but it's just that you mentioned our connection on the whole thing, really. So yeah, it was just to say if people want to learn more or get in touch about that, then I'm based in Tragford as well with Nicky. So yeah, it's...
Well, do you want to say something a bit more about the whole social prescribing, why it's come about?
Well, I can. Yeah, I'm a GP, and effectively, I think 10% of what comes through, you know, in terms of the way that people present, can be managed through the medical model, and a significant proportion of what people consult with needs a different solution. And the social prescribing agenda has really been recognised in the NHS 5-year forward view, and really given the, you know, the recognition that it deserves, that people often need something different to pharmaceuticals to feel better. So particularly, I don't know how much you all know really in the audience, but really an overview is that you know, rather than just pharmaceuticals alone, people are being increasingly encouraged to connect either with them, sort of their communities, or with the natural environment. And there's so many things that are going on across the country, and it's not that we haven't known this for years, but it's just that it's getting the recognition in the policy level now, which is really exciting. Yeah, so
there was some sort of pilot studies done in Bradford, was it?
Yeah, so I mean, if people want to look up a bit more in terms of the places that are doing really, you know, really sort of pioneering on this, there's Bromley by Bow. Their centre is fantastic, and the Compassionate Froome project. And again, I don't know what people know, but both of those are absolutely inspiring about what's possible when you mobilise a community, and for the well-being of the whole community.
No, we don't. I mean, speaking from myself, I only know a little bit. I mean, I went to the conference at the racecourse that Neil MacLeod was involved with. And it was very interesting to see all the health professionals there. But you know, I think it's such an exciting area, isn't it? Because he's a GP like you, and he said, you know, I spend so little of my time really talking to the people that really, you know, need to be talked to. Most of them just need to get outside. In fact, is the main thing he said.
Yeah, and we also, you know, well, we have an epidemic of loneliness as well. That's really, you know, really a reality. So, you know, it's just to recognise that need at a human level for connection, either with us or each other, or with the natural environment. And there's also some evidence coming through that, you know, if you do, I loved your first slide, Nicky, about, you know, you can't really care about the natural environment unless you've experienced it and you can name it. I think, you know, so this sense of, if people are connected or start to experience the natural environment, they're more likely to care for it. So I've thoroughly enjoyed your talk, and I'm a huge advocate for what you do, Nicky. So
thank you.
Thanks, Lucy, for that.
I'll shut up because I didn't mean to say anything, but you asked me to, so I'll go.
No, it's really, I wanted to. I mean, if anyone wants to talk, they can put their hand up. How do they do it?
Or unmute yourself, whatever. Because I think Maureen's got a question.
Okay.
Do Maureen?
Can't hear Maureen. You have to press the space bar, Maureen. Getting so bright in here. No.
If not, Sally wants to know a little bit more about why it's so important to remove the strimmings.
Because well, because these plants are such they're such opportunists. A lot of them, you know, are really good at actually thriving in the soil type of wherever you were. And so if you're just cutting the grass and leaving it there, what you're doing is you start to increase the fertility in the soil. So it breaks down, and it's mostly nitrogen from the grasses that goes back into the soil. And so the plants which really benefit most from that are the grasses. So the grasses feed them, they're feeding other grasses. And so you tend to end up with this rather we get a paucity of biodiversity, because the more and more rank grasses tend to take over. And I've noticed on the allotments, because getting my eye in more recently, especially joining the More Meadows group, that the grasses that I've got growing on the allotment, apart from the dreaded couch grass, of course, but is actually oat grass. And the oat grasses, they're the ones that grow really, really tall, you know, the massively tall grasses with these, well, like oat-like grains on the end. And so they're obviously benefiting from a very rich soil. So if you take the strimmings away, you only need to do it over about 3 years, and you reduce down. And then what you do is you open up the ground for all the kind of dandelion type plants, all those ones that form a rosette, the hawkweeds and all the rest of it that will get in there, and they will start to open it up. And you can do it with, also I noticed that someone had put something about yellow rattle. Was that you?
Yeah, that was Julia.
Because that's the other thing. If you want to create a perennial, we're talking about perennial wildflower meadows, not the ones with the poppies and the cornflowers, but the slower, longer term meadows. Yellow rattle is a hemiparasitic plant, and it feeds off a variety of other plants. And funnily enough, just today I asked Donna, there's a paper on which plants it feeds off, and I asked Donna if from More Meadows if she could send it to me, but I haven't got it yet. I do know that the yellow rattle feeds off grasses, and it feeds off legumes particularly, so the clovers and the bird's foot trefoil and all those kind of things, anything that sort of forms a pod for a seed. Yellow rattle likes that. So I don't know about buttercups. Buttercups are you know, they are quite, you know, there are some what we call weeds, you know, what we're redefining, but there are some which are more challenging, shall we say, you know, to deal with. I mean, in a meadow situation, I don't really find any of them particularly difficult. We have creeping thistle in our meadow, we have docks, and we have not giant hogweed, we've got hogweed. And you know, and I do a little bit of cutting and a little bit of light control with my scythe mainly, but you know, on the whole, I really like, and that's mostly because the field is owned by another group of people, and they kind of complain if there are these kind of weeds, what they see as weeds. But if it was all my field, I'd probably just let it do its own thing, you know.
I know Sally's asking for a link to Lucy's prescription project. So Lucy, if you want to send that to me, I can send it out with everything else in my email tomorrow.
Oh, I've just replied. Thanks, Kate.
I've just said, oh, well done.
Well, I've just said it was in the Woodland Trust magazine, and you had to be a member to access it. So what I'll do, Kate, is I'll give you my contact details, and people can always contact me directly to talk about.
Thank you, Lucy.
No problem.
That's great.
Bye.
Okay.
Okay, can I make my comment?
Yes, absolutely, Maureen. Please do.
Okay. So about lawns, there's one thing. I was brought up on a council estate, post-war council estate. My parents were very, very happy to have that facility, and they used to grow a lot of our food and everything. But if you kept your garden untidy, you were at risk of eviction. And that was, when you learn that lesson as a child, it's very hard over the years to get that lesson out of your head. So it's not just a case of people being crazy about being tidy. Some of us have had these things in our minds from childhood.
Yeah.
So that was my comment.
That's really... Sorry,
carry on.
No, you carry on. Go on.
So my question is just that I've just got a pond a wildlife pond. I bought lots of plants, and now it's getting a bit costly. So I'm going out into the hedgerows and getting seeds from wild seeds. Is it okay to sow them now, because wild things would be just falling on the ground now, or do I wait till the spring?
Yeah, most of the stuff. Yeah, as you say, wild things are they're shedding their seed now because they do need a period of vernalization, as it's called, basically cold weather. They like the cold and warming that breaks the dormancy. It does depend. So some plants, you need bare soil for most things, to get them in there. And I did it on our field. A lot of people saying it wouldn't work, but I did it on our field by just using molehills and badger scrapings and that kind of thing, and sprinkling them there. But you also, it's quite good to tread them in, because in a meadow you would be getting what's called poaching quite a lot, where animals like cattle and horse and ponies would be making little depressions, and that really helps to get the seed in. But so pushing it in and creating bare patches. And Rebecca Hoskins, in her in fact, I think there was another slide at the very end, Kate, I just realized, but it'll be on the thing with resources.
Yeah. Oh,
but,
yeah, there was, I think.
Rebecca Hoskins, who has got a most amazing blog site, really lovely website, and one of the bits in it is called Wolf Tree Farm, I think it is. But she talks about how she spread an enormous amount of wildflower seeds all over her farm, masses and masses of it, on this very, very degraded farm that she took over on the south coast of Devon. And she was amazed that only some of the wildflowers seemed to come up where they wanted to come up. Yeah. So they came up in different places. So they're very intelligent in a way. They will come up where they're suited. So you might not always get 100%, success on it.
Yeah. But it's worth doing that now.
Yeah, I would say so. Any time from now on. I mean, it's no great rush, but you can. I've got a lot of yellow rattle seed, and I generally go and start sowing it. Like I say, on bits of molehill, and I usually have a little bit in my pocket if I'm doing sort of guerrilla sowing, and I'll go around and do it, in different places where it's ready, Okay. And I think your comment about the the council estate and all that it's really interesting. And I know in America they have they can get actually prosecuted for not mowing their grass. And there's an amazing there's a great guy there called Ron Finley, who's a black guerrilla kind of gardener, and he dug up his bit of grass and grew vegetables, all these plants on it, food plants, and then put a sign up saying free food, and then he had the local authorities trying to prosecute him for it, and it just spurred him on to taking over derelict bits. And I just saw Jeremy put a thing up about seed bombing, and he was seed bombing and doing things. But you could look him up, Ron Finley, Finley. He's really inspirational, I think. But
I mean, we are being encouraged in Buckfordsley to leave our areas, talk about wildflowers. But as I say, it has been a process of consciousness raising in order to keep down all those messages from the past.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. I can understand it well.
Right, thank you.
Nikki, Kate was saying that she's clipped her field. A field is topped once a year, and they leave the clippings because they're too difficult to remove. Mm-hmm. But obviously, you've still got a lot of things growing. They mow their paths through. Is that
a big area, or? I think I would. This is a proper field.
Yeah, shared field.
I would encourage Kate to join to go on the More Meadows website, where there's a wealth of information. I mean, it's difficult to say because meadows can be in different stages of creation, so it really depends on what it's like. I mean, if you're cutting a field that's really thick and lush grass and you're not picking it up, then it's not going to get improved very well. Our field, which has been kind of grazed, winter grazed, cut, sometimes had hay taken off it. It's a whole mixture of things. This year we haven't had hay taken off it, partly because the grass it's hardly worth cutting it this year, because the yellow rattle's been in there and all the rest of it. So I don't know if Kate's got rattle in her field. No, which goes up Kate Yo.
Kate Yo, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to say a bit more about it, Kate?
Well, only that it's a co-owned field, and certainly one of the other owners is not the same mind of me as to management. So we've had to. It hasn't been easy. Let's put it that way. He's a mower man, so he just wants to. So I mean, very slowly we've actually been. I'm letting. We're planting up with a few trees and self-seeders actually, so it's sort of becoming a bit of a mixture of all sorts of things. As I say, we get in a tractor to top it, but he hasn't got, and I have muted in the past trying to get something to sort of rake all the clippings up, but it all proves too costly, expensive, etc. It's about 3 acres, so, and it's on a slope.
Right.
But we do get, as I say, we do have other things coming up in there. We've got a wet patch in there. We do get we've had an awful lot of hemlock wallstrop work as well. So, I mean, we get all sorts of things in there. So the wildlife value is quite good. We've got foxes and masses of mice and voles and shrews and all that sort of thing. But just things like the fleabane and the vetches. I mean, we've had brilliant vetch, and pignut is nice. I mean, that's all around, that's dotted around all over the place. So it does still have a certain amount of value even then. And quite a few meadow brown butterflies, beautiful marbled whites, one of my favorite. And some of the quite a lot of gatekeepers and that sort of thing. So, and some little blues or whatever. So,
I mean, it's you can't give a sort of categoric answer to these questions, because a little bit, some mowing is good in some areas. One of the people that's been farming for many years on the More Meadows group, she advocates sort of random mowing of fields, and she doesn't actually pick up. I mean, she does do grazing as well, but not to do it all, and to always leave bits, but to do bits and pieces, and that can work. But I would urge you to join the More Meadows group, because there's a lot of expertise there and help, and they're a really lovely bunch too.
Right,
and you can join, and we're looking, I'm on the steering group for that, and we're looking to extend it, so it's Dartmoor Meadows, so MOOR, moremeadows.org. But we're also looking to make it MORE Meadows and expand it out for the whole of Devon. So we're not just a Dartmoor based thing. So we're looking at the moment to get some funding for it and to extend it out. And I've always been very keen. It's partly what stuff I've been talking about here is to sort of encourage people to do it in their own lawns. I mean, I've got the smallest meadow on the More Meadows website, which is my shed roof. I've got a green shed roof, and that's really good. So everyone can have a meadow of some sort. Is that Jane? Are you putting your hand up? No. Sorry, I just see people they want to talk.
Sticking on the mowing theme, Nicky, Sally asked, how often do you recommend to cut a year for meadowing? Once or twice, or?
Well, we haven't cut our meadow at all this year.
No.
We were going to cut it for hay, but it was too. By the time this is quite recently, it's not really worth cutting this year, because the rattle has taken over so much. This is partly why I want the vicar of Tragford vicar to come and have a look at our meadow, because if the churchyard was treated like that, they wouldn't have to do all that strimming at £900 a cut. It costs a lot of money to employ teams of strimmers out, and a hell of a lot of fossil fuel. This is what exasperates me. when you can just, what we do is we graze our field in the winter. So from Michaelmas, which is the traditional date, which is the 21st of September, I believe. So basically from that sort of most, near the end of September, you can then graze it on and off through to the end of February or into March. And they'll eat it all down, and that works. That's a traditional management, sort of meadows management. You can get yellow rattle seeds from me.
Can I just follow it up with a question, just to follow up on that question about how often to cut? Because I'm at the point now where I think, well, I probably need to get some, someone with a tractor to come and cut it for me. I didn't think that leaving it was a good option, to leave it not cut. I don't have an animal for keeping it down. Is it an option for a meadow to kind of not cut it at this stage? Yeah,
it is an option, and it's actually quite good for a whole another lot of animal. One of the most important ones probably is barn owls. Barn owls love rough, uncut grasses because they hunt over meadows like that. So that is definitely an option. Yeah, I mean you will find. Have you got rattle in your field as well, or is it just?
Yeah, I've kind of done what you've just suggested to Kate, in the sense that I've got too big an area for me to clear it all, because it's expensive and difficult. As far as I know, I haven't found a good method yet. So what I did last year was just cleared with a rake by myself a section, and I put yellow rattle in there, and that seems to have had a good effect so far this year.
And you don't want to be, I found you don't want to be in a rush. It doesn't happen overnight.
No. You
were talking about this as a long-term plan. So, in year one, you do a little bit like that, and year two, do another little bit. And, slowly, you'll find you increase the biodiversity, and it should be fine. We have got on the More Meadows website, there are the list of contractors who can do cutting and raking and and all the rest of it. So if you do want to do a bit, you can do that, but we always say don't cut the whole field anyway, because you've got to leave a sort of mercy strips for all those insects that are in there. You don't want to completely take away their homes. So it is destructive. Whatever you do, the haymaking process is quite destructive in its own right, and it uses lots of fossil fuel. And again, Rebecca Hoskins talks about that, on her farm. So quite a lot of farmers, the more enlightened farmers, are not making hay, but they have running fewer animals, and moving them around the farm. They're doing more mob grazing, so they're doing more concentrated grazing in smaller areas, moving them on and moving them on. And Rebecca gave a fantastic talk for More Meadows, which is on the website. You can watch it. And she was going back in history and saying that farmers would have had, of course, more small fields. The stock would have been moved more regularly, and the field they had medicine fields for animals to self-medicate. If they were getting poorly, they would be put in a field that hadn't been cut at all to find the right herbs that they wanted, and so on. So it's a fascinating area, and there's so much to it, because it depends on your soil type, it depends on the aspect, it depends on what's there. There's no kind of simple answers to or straightforward. You really need to see it, see the land and have a bit of a, but you can't go wrong within those kind of general guidelines.
Is John still there? Because he's put a nice bit about the fields at the meadows at the end of Fermothy, a good place to find yellow rattle, and quite nice. John, are you still online?
The meadows where, Kate, did you say?
At the end of Fermothy. He might have gone now, but there's plenty of knapweed, scabious and sorrel in the late summer. And he's put, it's a nice local story about pig nuts, is that they grow prolifically down on the new development at Stanley Gardens, where John is the caretaker. The badgers come in every night through the spring last year from Tragford House, foraging for them. He planted some of the corns in the school garden over the road, Yeah, so that's nice.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, and he
And-
said also there's great meadows with lots of yellow rattle in Lloyd Park, Croydon.
Well, we've got, and through the More Meadows, again, we do a seed swap and seed share stuff anyway. And I've harvested over nearly 2 kilos of yellow rattle seed from our fields, which I've been also asking people for donations for. So, you know, and between us, I mean, there's green hay you can get as well through the More Meadows group.
So if people want to source yellow rattle from you, Nicky, what's the best way to go about that?
Just write to me and I'll save some. You can get it from Goran Farm as well. Goran Farm, local, they're in, you know, well, fairly local, the other side of Honiton. They have got the most amazing wildflower seed collection, because the guy who took over the farm was an engineer, and he's developed seed sorting equipment. So he's got orchid seeds as well, all sorts. If you look on Goran Farm, I can't remember what the end is, whether it's .org or .co.uk, but Goran Farm is a really good source. But they can write to me as well.
So can I give your email address then in the follow-up?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will probably wind up now, unless there's anyone got anything else that they want to, that hasn't been said, that they'd like to ask before we round up. Quiet. What I will do tomorrow is I will email everyone with a link for a survey, just a little kind of just a kind of follow-up survey, and it'll have the PDF of all the slides, and yeah, and also your email address, Nicky, for people that want to contact you, and also Lucy's as well. Yeah, I think that's the best thing to go.
And the last slide that I think got cut off.
Yes, sorry.
I put quite a few resources on there as well. I can't remember what I put on there now, but
thank you, Nicky. That was such a wonderful presentation and talk. Really, really interesting. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Yeah. So good. Thank you.
They're all muted, Kate.
They're all muted. They can unmute themselves. I'll just put a thumbs up.